Hello and welcome to the Manchester is Red podcast. My name is Steven Railston and I am your host today. We are recording on the Friday afternoon after a memorable night at Old Trafford, which saw Manchester United defeat Barcelona 2-1 in the Europa League. And my good friend and colleague Samuel Luckhurst was there, and what was a fantastic night, wasn't it, Samuel? How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Very well. Still a little bit tired after last night. As you say, it was a privilege to be at. There's a lot of work that goes on. Not that anyone's going to be getting the violin out. I'm not expecting that, but just a slight shame for those of us who went to the mix zone for an hour and didn't get to actually speak to anyone. The night ended on a bit of a bum note, but for Manchester United, it was one of the best nights they've had in years. I think it's safe to say.
Plenty of coffee this morning, Samuel, was it? Quite important.
There has been. Yeah, there were a couple of Melitas had at Carrington today, as you well know.
Excellent. We'll just get straight into it. As I've said, it was a really, really special night. I think personally for me, Samuel, the atmosphere was one of the best I've heard since reporting on the club. I don't know how you rank it in the years that you've been covering United. But obviously the first win against Barcelona since 2008. They were trailing at half-time, 1-0 down, but a superb second-half performance, and it was just fantastic to see, wasn't
it? It made it better that they were quite stumped, it felt like, after Lewandowski scored that penalty. Barcelona's game management in the first half, after they went 1-0 up, was very impressive. I thought for a half, Sergio Busquets rolled back the years. He was brilliant. Frenkie de Jong was brilliant. He had a couple of recoveries in his own third, and the performance from United was flat after Lewandowski scored. There was that big Fernandes chance in only the third minute, and you did wonder what they would do. How quickly would they try and change things? I thought Ten Hag should have switched Sancho and Fernandes during the first half, but then he was more proactive than that in bringing Antony on, and we've seen how vital his game management and how proactive that has been in recent weeks with changes. It happened with Sancho coming on during the Leicester game at half time, and immediately there was an impact. Sancho and Fernandes played in the roles that they're best in. They combined for the goal from Fred. I think that was only less than 3 minutes into the second half, and that just set the tone for a pretty uproarious 45 minutes. I didn't quite realise until probably this morning how relatively early in the half Antony's goal came. I think it was the 72nd or 73rd minute, but United handled the situation when they had to protect their lead for 20 odd minutes very well. There was just that opportunity for Lewandowski right at the death, and he didn't really quite connect with it. I'm not necessarily sure it would have been going on target, but it was still immense defending from Varane. And in hindsight, I think I should have given him probably a 9 out of 10 last night. Sometimes you take his brilliance for granted, and he was exceptional. There were a lot of very, very good individual performances. Fred was terrific. Casemiro was excellent. Obviously, Antony came on and got the winning goal, but I thought his attacking play before that was really good. He seems to have become a little bit quicker as well in the last month when he's played. He's operating at greater speed. I think since that Arsenal game where he was running down cul-de-sacs or he was receiving the ball too deep, there has been a shift there. He's receiving the ball in better areas. I'll go back to that example Arteta gave about wingers when they get the ball so that they can take it in one motion, they're facing goal, which is something that Bukayo Saka obviously does magnificently, and Antony is doing that more, and he was getting in the right areas last night. He's got a very good partnership with Aaron Wan-Bissaka as well, a very unlikely partnership, and he took his goal very, very well. It was a very he just caressed the ball in, and of course there was pandemonium when that goal went in. There were some supporters who were getting into a bit of a quarrel with the Barcelona analysts, and one of the Barcelona analysts was given a fair bit back. And that was at 1-1. So you can imagine what it was like when it goes 2-1. And unsurprisingly, those analysts, like the City analysts last month, they vacated their seats before full time. They wanted to get out of there, irrespective of what may have happened before the final whistle. I can't quite remember if they went before Lewandowski's opportunity. But it was another terrific night for United, and you can tell right at the death not at the death, after the full-time whistle, the celebratory scenes, they were reminiscent of the derby last month. Rafael Varane's done that cheerleading a couple of times now. Both occasions United have been 1-0 down. They've come back to win 2-1 against Manchester City, against Barcelona. The way things are going, it's difficult to see what could stop United. So it would be especially galling if they somehow end this season trophyless, because they're still competing on 4 fronts. And they've seen Barcelona off in the Europa League. So as far as that goes, where they've got Real Betis in the last 16, as the chant goes, it really is a case of bring on Spaniards by the score.
It's very, very winnable, that competition now, isn't it? You're 100% right. There was a lot of merit in starting Sancho in that number 10 position after his good display against Leicester at the weekend. But it wasn't working, was it, if we're honest? And Ten Hag had the initiative, obviously, to change that at half-time, bring Anthony on, take Weghorst on. I think that's been the theme of the season, Samuel, that Ten Hag has been so impressive with his in-game management. It strikes me as one of his strongest assets. How would you rank his in-game management with managers have gone, like Mourinho, Van Gaal, David Moyes? Where would you rank him in the post-Ferguson era?
Oh, he's the best at it. I think watching United in recent weeks and how they've gone to Camp Nou, they've played on the front foot. They're not making allowances just because they're playing Barcelona. They're not compromising their identity. I think it's pretty much confirmed that Ten Hag is a world-class coach. You can completely see why Guardiola said last year he'd have been a worthy successor to him at City. Yeah. He'd have fit in perfectly at City, and he spoke very effusively about Barcelona last week, and somewhere along the line it would not be a surprise if he ends up coaching Barcelona, given that club's affinity with Ajax and certain Dutch players and coaches who've represented them over the decades, dating back to the pioneering impact that Johan Cruyff had there. But however he operates, he seems to get a response from the players, whether it's dropping Rashford against Wolves and sending him on and he goes and gets the winning goal. Everyone has bought into his methods there. They know that they can't ride roughshod over this manager. They know that he's not a soft touch. It's not like... sometimes I think people say, oh, he will always make a substitution on the hour mark. He's disproved that claim in recent matches with the half-time changes. It'd be fascinating to actually see how many half-time changes he has made this season that have had that have had a direct impact to United obtaining points or getting a win in games. And the point about Fernandes, I looked at, I think Fernandes has played 7 games. He started 7 games for United on the right this season. In the first against Sociedad, I think it was his flick on to Ronaldo. Ronaldo plays it on to Garnacho. Garnacho scores. Villa in the Cup, I think there was a goal and an assist. Bournemouth, I think he got an assist. City, he got a goal. Last week against Leicester, he got 2 assists. Last week against Barcelona, he created, two very good chances. And last night, after a poor first half from him, he moves centrally and he gets another assist. He's not playing all of those games on the right wing. He's not staying on the right wing for all of those games. But he's having impacts on them still. Another player would be played out of position. They'd think, why is the manager doing that? Why am I having to move to the fringes to accommodate Donny van de Beek or Jadon Sancho, who's a winger? But with this United squad, if a player plays slightly out of position, they're still likely to perform because of the manager, because of the belief that is coursing around that squad at the moment. And we're in terms of like the mistakes Ten Hag's made this season, you could probably count them on one hand, and the majority of them were made in August, whether it was playing Christian Eriksen up front against Brighton or Eriksen and Fred as the midfielders against Brentford, and a little further along down the line, October, not playing Casemiro against Manchester City, not integrating Casemiro into the team quickly enough. And we've said before that Ten Hag in those first months, it did feel like he was learning on the job a little bit, which is a strange thing to say for a 50-something manager who's coached at Ajax and was a coach at Bayern Munich a decade ago as well. But it's when you're as manager of Manchester United, the level of expectation and the situation they were in at the start of the season, he was having to learn things on the go. I think he's learned everything now, and it's very much his team. They play in his image. He's got players there who are his signings. There's no denying that. And even with someone like Wout Weghorst, who's got an absolutely dreadful record of 1 goal in 11 starts, the ends still by and large justify the means. And when they don't, he's hooked at half time. Anthony comes on, another one of Ten Hag's signings, and he scores the winning goal. So he's a world-class coach as far as I'm concerned. I know it may sound a little bit premature, and of course, if they don't win a trophy this season, if they somehow don't finish in the top 4, then it is going to be extremely disappointing, to say the least. But the way United are going at the moment, last night, I know a lot of United fans won't care for the comparison, but I thought, look, the atmosphere, the manner of the victory, the connection between the players and the supporters, it was reminiscent of Liverpool under Klopp in their pomp. And Klopp's obviously still at Liverpool, but United have been striving to get to that level for 5 years, that level of harmony between the supporters and the players, of having an identity, of playing intense football, of just having belief back at the club. And look, you look at Liverpool's run under Klopp; they won 4 major honours, and that's what you have to strive for in football. I know it's Liverpool, and obviously a lot of Manchester United fans don't want to be likened to Liverpool, but if you're aiming to try and reach the level that Liverpool have been at in recent years, that's got to be the way you go about it.
It was said in the press conference today, wasn't it, that Peter Schmeichel said it was Ferguson-esque, the performance, and I thought you were going to keep company with Schmeichel there, Samuel, which, as we've saw over the last few years,
I don't want
might
that.
not be the best thing. That's what I mean with his comments, yeah.
A man who uses "we" when he's talking in the media, which is always a no-no, and especially if you're a player who, well, he infamously cartwheeled celebrating a Manchester City goal against United, so he's desperately he's incessant in trying to curry favour with Man United fans, but a lot of them still have long memories.
It can be cringeworthy sometimes, and obviously Ten Hag can kind of do nothing wrong at the moment, Samuel, but could he fix our 5-a-side team? Is that beyond him?
I think as far as the MEN 5-a-side weeks go, I think that may be beyond him. But if he was there at the Etihad campus, I think there would be quite the crowd that would flock along. So I don't think he'd be lacking players or takers.
MEN 5-a-side, the ultimate acid test. That's it for part 1. We'll be back in a moment. So Samuel, we'll talk about some individual performances now, focusing on them. We'll have to start with the boys from Brazil, Fred and Anthony, who we've just touched upon there in the first section. But Fred, he's a bit of a crazy player, isn't he? He's so inconsistent sometimes. He can have brilliant moments and then moments of, madness in the same game. We saw that at Barcelona in the first leg. But last night, Samuel, he was superb, wasn't he? He was everywhere. He was involved with everything. He scored the equaliser. And for me, it was one of the best performances in a red shirt for him. Would you agree with that?
I agree. I wrote that in my preview for the League Cup final, that it's certainly up there, probably top 5. I thought he was tremendous. It's maybe not his best performance of the season even. I thought he was terrific against Tottenham back in October. But even in the first half, he was bustling. His energy, you can't underestimate. He's very rarely been injured during his time at United, and so he's been involved and also been available for the majority of games since he joined them nearly 5 years ago now. And he was always going to start last night. There was some wondering, well, would it be Sabitzer, because Sabitzer did quite well against Leicester, but the giveaway was that Fred came off after United went 2-0 up against Leicester, and some might have rather justifiably thought, well, he was dreadful in that game. He did not play well, and that's the strange thing about him sometimes. Like last week, his 2 performances against Leicester and Barcelona were patchy, to put it politely, yet he still came away from those matches having laid on goals for Marcus Rashford with assists that are worthy of praise. It's not like he just passed the ball to someone from 50 yards from goal and they go on an amazing run and score an amazing goal. They were worthy assists. They were good proactive passes. And when you've got Casemiro there who can hold the fort and Fred is better in an advanced position. Last season confirmed that under Ralph Rangnick. Then you've got someone higher up the pitch to press. Fernandes is very good at pressing. Ten Hag has been playing Weghorst every week, or twice a week, not just because Anthony Marshall's out injured, but because Weghorst is a very active presser. So then you've got three pretty relentless pressers in the team. And this is a team that last season, the concept of pressing, they just could not crack it. Wasn't even a case of being able to crack it. They seemed almost incapable of it. They were dreadful at it.
It was that bad.
It was. It really was. Nobody can deny that. Everybody saw it with their own eyes. They were probably literally incapable of doing it, or they just didn't have the personalities that were prepared to do it, with maybe the odd exception. And again, in Fernandes' case, or Fred's case, they were lone wolves most of the time. And I mean, when his goal went in, I thought there's no way he's cleanly connected with that. I think the way the ball went in was a giveaway. But he's got into that area. That's the role Ten Hag wants him to fulfil. It's okay. You're starting off in a deep position, but you've got the license to get forward, because that's where you can be, where we can maximise you the most, whether it's on the ball or off the ball. Probably more so off the ball, but he's still got that sense of adventure to get forward. I think it was Fred who just missed out on Fernandes' cross inside 20 odd seconds last week in Camp Nou as well. So, as I said, with Casemiro, it's in some ways they've got quite a complete partnership there in midfield. I'm not saying it's the best midfield partnership in the world, because it isn't, but Casemiro is probably the best defensive midfielder in the world, and he also happens to be one of the best passers of the ball around. His pass for Fernandes in the 3rd minute last night was tremendous. It deserved a goal, and it was just a pity for him that Fernandes narrowed the angle for himself. And then you've got Fred, who complements Casemiro very well in that he can be let off the leash, he can get forward. He's not exactly renowned for his finishing, and but some of his goals for United, they've been quite scrappy, or they've been a deflection. But he has become a pretty decent and handy goal-scoring threat this season. I think he scored against Tottenham, and there have been a couple of goals. He must have about 5 goals this season, I would think Fred has. So if you contributing with that number from quite a deep position in midfield, I think that's pretty good going. And look, there have been times of late where, because of the Eriksen injury and Fred, that has obviously ensured that Fred has been a certain starter for United. He has been overexposed and he has been overplayed, because he isn't a player who should, with his skill set, should be playing as regularly as he has been of late. But you're going to get complete commitment with him. He's very rarely injured. Every manager who speaks of him speaks very highly of him as well. And look, as far as this month has gone, I think he's probably been involved in, if not started, every game, but he certainly started the majority. And if you're going to save your best performance for Barcelona at home in a return leg of a knockout stage, then I think everybody's bound to go home happy.
And we should take this opportunity to blow our own trumpet, Samuel, because we just don't do that enough. I checked the comments, I rarely do this, but the top comment on our panel for the teams that we submitted for the Barcelona game, all were questioning why me, you and Rich had picked Fred. But it was a masterstroke, wasn't it?
Because we know more about football, don't we, Stephen?
Of course we do, Samuel, of course. That's exactly what I'm saying. But I'll put away the trumpet and we'll talk about Anthony, because I will eat some humble pie with Anthony, Samuel. An indifferent first few months, I'd say. Look, he scored a few goals when he first arrived. A big transfer fee was invested. That was his 6th goal of the season last night, and I kind of get a bit frustrated when he's cutting in and it's becoming a bit too predictable. But he delivered on a big stage and a big moment, and he deserves a lot of credit for that.
He does, and I think he's got 7 goals now this season, which is,
I think it's
maybe
6, if I counted correctly.
Oh, sorry,
count.
It is 6. He got one for Ajax, so 7 overall for him this season, but 6 for United, which is reasonable going. I'd still say it's quite modest. 7, even though it's one more, it does sound like quite a lot better. But
that's just because of Ronaldo's shirt number.
Yeah,
in it in your head. You hear the words
exactly. Yeah, you go from a 6 or a 7. It is quite a level up. But I go back to that Arsenal game. I thought he was very poor in those 2 games against Palace and Arsenal, and also they were very important games for United. They'd just beaten City, and there was this title chatter that was going on. And I always felt that they needed to take probably 4 points from those games to be considered proper challenges, serious challenges, and they didn't. And his contributions in both those games was poor. He didn't get going, and when you're coming up against Arsenal, your opposite number or player is Saka, and you play the way and Anthony played the way he did, and Saka played the way he did. That was a point where we could say, okay, he's got to be criticised. We weren't really laying into him in a constructive way because United were winning, so it didn't really feel particularly topical. But when United had 2 poor results and Anthony played poorly in both those games, the criticism was justified. And again, we have to blow our own trumpet because we're the ones who ask questions about Ten Hag, about this player. Why isn't he doing so well? Ten Hag gives a very constructive analysis that's also quite critical, and then the player goes and performs quite well, which is what Anthony did away at Forest. I think it was the next game after Arsenal, and his performances since then, by and large, have been quite good. I know he's been out for, what was it? I think that was his first game in 3 weeks. It might have been against Barcelona because of, I think Ten Hag rather vaguely described it as a leg injury. So I'm not too sure what the specific issue was, but the key thing I thought when the teams dropped last night, both teams were as predicted, but Barcelona only brought 20 players over, and 2 of their substitutes were goalkeepers. You looked at their substitutes list and you thought, apart from Ansu Fati and Ferran Torres, who there's mitigation with both of them. Fati's not really been the player he was since his injury. Ferran Torres kind of flatters to deceive, really. He's not a starter at Barcelona. Barcelona didn't have great depth on their bench. United had quite a deep bench last night. They had an entirely different back 4. They had experienced midfielders in McTominay and Sabitzer, and they also had 2 game changers in Garnacho and Anthony. Normally, United have just been, if you're talking about game changers on the United's bench, it's only ever Garnacho or Sancho, depending on who's starting the game. The difference last night, as I said, was that they had 2 of them. Both of them came on, and Anthony did very well. Garnacho did pretty well as well. And that was the difference. And that's why it'll be interesting to see what Ten Hag does with the attack, looking ahead to Sunday, where I think it's still only 9 substitutes. So he has to be quite ruthless. There are going to be a few players disappointed who won't be making that squad. It's a pity. I've been of the opinion for quite some time that matchday squads might as well just be what they are for World Cups and European Championships. Just have 23 players available. That's the case in Champions League games this season, and it has been for a number of seasons now, I think dating back to the 2019 final. But Ten Hag is going to have to be quite choosy with his substitutes. But as far as the attackers go in particular, at the risk of dwelling on or getting onto the final earlier than intended, it'll be interesting to see what he does there, because I think Anthony has to start on the strength of last night, and then it's a case of, do you want 2 wingers on the bench against a team who are quite methodical, who are very difficult to break down, or do you go with one of them also from the start, which I think a lot of United fans would be happy to do. But if you're a manager, if you're playing the percentages, if you have to plan for every possible scenario, you're probably likelier to stick by Weghorst, even though he's not much of a goal-scoring threat. And Ten Hag has been making those calls. He's not getting many of those calls wrong at the moment.
And we can't talk about the boys from Brazil without talking about Casemiro a bit more, because another fantastic performance. We talk about these kind of experienced players in big games, and you've talked about Varane, but his experience along with Casemiro is telling, really, and it helps the team so much, especially on these big nights. But he had those 2 blocks before half-time, didn't he, when Barcelona were leading 1-0, and they were fantastic. And I don't know, have you been as surprised as me, Samuel, about his passing? Because I watched him regularly at Real Madrid, as most people did in the Champions League, and I knew he was world-class. But his passing this season has just been just unbelievable, really. His ability to pick a long distance pass so to unlock a defence. I didn't know he had that in his locker, to be honest with you.
If you want to sum up Casemiro in 2 seconds, it's that clip from the 3rd minute last night where his first pass is poor, it's intercepted, but then he wins the ball immediately, and without taking a touch, he pings the pass perfectly into Fernandez's path. And that's him all over. He's the best defensive midfielder in the world, and by his standards as well, he's probably one of the best attacking midfielders in the world with his passing range. He is almost on a par with Toni Kroos or Luka Modric, but because he was surrounded by those two world-class players for so many years at Real Madrid, he probably didn't have to showcase it that much. At United, it's a little bit different. They could have always done with someone with that skill set, and the United midfield this season compared with recent years has been transformed, not just by Casemiro but Christian Eriksen as well, who was having a very, very good season up until his injury, and they've got good options there still at the moment. I mean, Sabitz has been decent. McTominay's cameos over the last week, I should say, have been quite encouraging, given that he's been out injured. And Fred, obviously, he can blow hot and cold at times, but he is still capable of some truly sensational performances. But Casemiro is undeniably world class, and for United, it's reassuring that they signed someone from one of Europe's elite clubs on a very, very high salary in very questionable circumstances. Questionable from the outside anyway, because United did manage to keep a lid on it for a long, long time. But let's face it, Casemiro was not the preferred target. That was Frenkie de Jong. But I think most United supporters at the time felt that Casemiro was the profile of midfielder they needed more than the type of player the type of player or midfielder that de Jong is. As brilliant as de Jong was last night, and as brilliant a player as de Jong is, they needed an absolute defensive midfield specialist. The Brentford game proved that, and Ten Hag knew it after that as well. And again, Ten Hag's hit rate in the transfer, as far as recruitment goes, it's been very, very good so far. In terms of the permanent signings, there's very little to grumble about if you're a Manchester United supporter, and Casemiro has been one of the players of the season in the Premier League, full stop, never mind just for United.
If De Jong had been signed after that Brentford game, he wouldn't have had the same impact. It's just simple as that. The midfield would have been overrun, wouldn't it, and continue to get overwhelmed in games. The impact he's made, the difference he's made, the physicality and the presence has been fantastic. But the big question, Samuel, has he been signing of the season? Because I think at around Christmas time, halfway through the season, me, you and Tyrone sat down and we did a little school reports, didn't we? And we discussed who had been the signing of the season. And I think we were a bit humming and hawing between Lisandro Martinez and Casemiro. So would you lean towards one or the other now? I'd personally go for Casemiro. I'd go for Casemiro now.
I would go. It kind of doesn't make some sense in that I'd say Casemiro is probably more of a front runner for Player of the Year as far as United go. But I'd say Martinez is more their signing of the season, in that there was so much more scrutiny on Martinez. The fee was quite hefty, £55.3 million, I think it was the overall fee. He'd come from Ajax. Casemiro had the pedigree, he had the clout. He was a Brazil international, still is a Brazil international. Although Martinez won the Copa America with Argentina, as you saw at the World Cup, he's still not a regular for them. And where he was a player who'd played under Ten Hag, look, I think we were all quite open about it at the time. You did wonder, well, is this the way to go about recruitment? Should you just be signing players who you've worked with, who you're familiar with? But and also there was the whole thing about the height, and his height did matter at Brentford because United got done at a corner and he was caught in no man's land, and he was hooked at half time that day. But since then his height has barely mattered. He has been terrific, and he's well on the way to being a world-class centre-back. I think with players you have to give them a bit more time to really to really assign them that status. I think he's still got to probably get through the whole season, but the way he's going about it, he'll soon be worthy of that status. He wins duels. He's brilliant with his use of the ball. You talk about game changers. Martinez coming on at Ellen Road the other week was a game changer. It opened up things for United. They had a more confident centre back on the ball who can break the lines with his passing, and he does it at will. And Ajax released their scouting reports on Martinez after he left the club, just to give supporters, some insight into how they go about that strategy. And they were raving about his passing, and his passing is terrific. And again, like Casemiro, he's another defensive-minded player who is a huge asset in attack. I go back to the Sancho goal against Liverpool in August. United were very, very patient in that build-up. And one of the key passes is Martinez's, which goes from the middle third to the final third. And then the play just quickens, and it keeps going forward, and they get the goal. And he's not really looked back since that barge on Mohamed Salah in the first minute that night. He's been consistently excellent since then. So I think for the scrutiny that was on him, and the justifiable scrutiny as well, I don't think anybody was really saying, oh yeah, Lisandro Martinez is going to be a definite success for Manchester United. He would be my signing of the season so far. It would be very, very odd if Martinez and Casemiro weren't in the Premier League team of the season the way they're going at the moment.
Do you think you could be a salesman, Samuel? Do you think if you weren't a journalist you could be a salesman? Because you've just made a compelling case there. You've sold the idea.
I don't think so.
Of Martinez.
No, I'm too bad with numbers. So I think if I was to be a director of football, I'd only go so far.
Well, a compelling case for Martinez nonetheless. We'll wrap that up then for part 2. We'll be back in a moment with a look ahead to the weekend, because of course we've got a big cup final at Wembley against Newcastle. Now, Samuel, there's a big game at the weekend, as I've just said. You're making the trip down to the capital, down to London, where Manchester United will take on Newcastle in the League Cup, or the Carabao Cup. So for sponsorship reasons, I'll get that name in after last week's podcast. And it's going to be a great game, isn't it? We've just had Barcelona. This squad are riding high on confidence, and they must be incredibly confident and hopeful of picking up that trophy on Sunday, which, more importantly, would end the club's worst trophy drought for over 40 years.
Well, they have to be confident of it, certainly. I mean, Newcastle have got the advantage of freshness. I think since that they played against Bournemouth, United have played 4 games. Newcastle have only played 1, which was against Liverpool last week. And given the circumstances with Nick Pope's red card, it got to a point where Eddie Howe was resting players. I think Joe Linton was a yellow card away from suspension, so he came off, and they played within themselves because the game was pretty much lost, even though they had a pretty good opportunity at the end to make it quite nervy for Liverpool. I think it was Callum Wilson's chance, wasn't it? But Newcastle are having a really good season. You look at their back four. I think Trippier started every league game. Dan Burn has started all but one of their league games. Shaw, I think, has started all but one of their league games as well.
Excellent. Yeah.
Botman has started 20 of the 23 league games. They've had a clear and obvious back four, back five even with the keeper. So the loss of Pope is huge, and he's been the best goalkeeper in the Premier League this season. And also, you talk about beyond just the goalkeeping, his game management is crucial for Newcastle, as Ten Hag alluded to today. He's not the only one who's been annoyed by that. And they've got a lot going for them up front as well. When you actually look at Newcastle's team, you think, well, actually, I can see why they are competing for the Champions League this season. A lot of clubs missed the boat with Eddie Howe. I have no idea why Everton didn't turn to him. Well, I do, because they're badly run. They've got fired Moshiri, who's just until Sean died, she was always about getting some kind of starry named manager in, and it was never going to work really with just about every manager that he plumped for. But Eddie Howe was well worthy of the Newcastle job. He'd have been worthy of the Everton job as well on the umpteen opportunities they had to appoint him while he was at Bournemouth, and during that period he was out of work after leaving Bournemouth. I think he didn't have a job for 18 months, which he was being talked about as becoming Celtic manager, and I thought he should be affronted by that really. He's very, very clearly a Premier League quality manager, and he should be managing in the Premier League. So you say it's going to be a good game. I'm not so sure about that. I think Newcastle, they're a very methodical team. They've got a brilliant defensive record. They're very, very difficult to break down. I know Loris Karius is going to be in goal, but this is a shot of redemption for him, for his career. It's a position nobody thought he would be in, having to come into this game as the fourth choice Newcastle goalkeeper, but starting a cup final. But there was, in the end, it seems there was method in Erik ten Hag's decision to start Martin Dubravka in a couple of games during his very, very strange loan spell at United. So United will be favourites for this, but Newcastle have got the advantage of freshness, and I think finals, as Jose Mourinho actually said, finals are to be won, they're not to be played. And I think a lot of Newcastle fans would endorse that slogan ahead of Sunday's game.
I was probably putting my salesman hat on, saying it would be a good game, because it probably will, to be fair, be a tight, cagey affair. And Eddie Howe, when he was out of work, spent time with a few other clubs around Europe, shadowing some managers, and he went around with Diego Simeone, Samuel, Atletico Madrid, and I think we can see that this season when we talk about his in-game management. Because let's be fair, it's a bit cheeky, should we say? We saw that at Liverpool early in the season when Newcastle got beat at Anfield, and we saw it all the way through the campaign. And that's a big reason why they're fifth in the Premier League and why they've had the success they've had. We were both at the press conference today, and it was discussed with Ten Hag, and Ten Hag basically said Newcastle are an annoying team and they want to annoy you. Could you expand on what else Ten Hag said at the press conference today, Samuel, about Newcastle? Because I found it quite interesting, his comments.
Well, we were both there today, and whenever you're coming up against a team, there's an innocuous question about what do you make of so-and-so, and of course it's what do you make of Newcastle. And he started with a very complimentary tone about how they have a clear style, and then he said they're annoying. And Simon Stone asked a question, and he said they're annoying, like with a question mark at the end. And he said, yeah, they tried to annoy you. And I was surprised it wasn't picked up on sooner. So fortunately, when it came around to me, and this was one of those days where we feel a little bit tired and where things are going so well and there aren't too many angles. I was wondering what can I actually ask him. I was thinking the difficulty of informing players they're not in a cup final squad or what have you. Thankfully, he said that Newcastle are annoying. So I just said, when you specifically mean annoying, I think we all had an idea of what he was referring to, but I specifically said, do you mean time wasting? And he confirmed that, and then he said that they're the worst for ball in play in their games in the league, which isn't quite true, it turns out. Leeds are the worst for it, but Newcastle are second worst.
Dirty Leeds.
Exactly. That was exactly what some of us said in the press room upon that revelation, with the cameras turned off, I might add. But Newcastle are certainly the most infamous for it because they have Nick Pope, who is the world heavyweight champion of time wasting. He used to do it for Burnley. I remember United fans in the Stretford end on Boxing Day in 2017 becoming very irate with his time wasting, and some have long memories, so they haven't forgotten about that. You had the Liverpool game earlier in the season where he spent 2 minutes of the 5 minimum minutes of added time down with an apparent injury. Liverpool get a 99th minute winner, and Newcastle players, as they're going off, you've got Scousers sarcastically pointing at their wrists because of the amount of time that Newcastle had wasted. And of course Arteta kicked off about it in January. I think that day the ball was in play for 43 minutes and 17 seconds. It was clocked out of the 90, which is an absolute scandal, really, if you're a paying match goer and you want to you go to watch a football game, and then for the majority of the time the ball's not in play. But Newcastle are quite brazen about it. As you said, whilst he was out of work, Eddie Howe went to Atletico Madrid, and if you're talking about the world heavyweight champions in the art of being streetwise, it is Atletico Madrid. United discovered that last season. United were not remotely streetwise, and you do need that quality for certain occasions. And of course Newcastle signed Kieran Trippier 13 months ago. He played under Simeone at Atletico, and he is of the personality who can mix it up. He's a brilliant right back. He can play brilliantly. He's probably been the best right back in the Premier League this season. He's done it at a World Cup. He's done it at He's done it at World Cups, I should say. He's done it at a European Championship. But he can also mix it up. He can manage games very well. He's got the experience and he's played under the personalities as well, not just at Atletico, but Mauricio Pochettino at Tottenham. Tottenham could mix it up at times as well. It wasn't just all champagne football with them. They had some they had some serious players in there who could put themselves about and could look after themselves. So Newcastle have absolutely, they've inherited this identity, which under a different manager, under different circumstances, might be anathema to the supporters, because with Newcastle you associate the fans wanting champagne football and being entertained, and I think they want to get to that level, and I think they eventually will under Howe, going off his track record at Bournemouth and some of the signings they've made in Alexander Isak and Anthony Gordon, and there'll probably be maybe two or three other flair players who come in the summer. But for now, it is working for them. They've slipped down the table a little with, I think they've won one in the last 7 in the Premier League. They've only lost one as well. But they are happy with this identity of being a very methodical team, difficult to break down. They're unpopular as well, let's face it. Since the takeover, a lot of football fans are willing teams to beat Newcastle. Our friend Dave Hughes of an Evertonian persuasion, I had no idea about this Everton Newcastle rivalry that apparently merits its own Wikipedia page. But I also got another text from a friend who's an Evertonian who told me in the week, saying like how much he wants to see United batter Newcastle. So
it's universal now, though, isn't it? It is.
Yeah, it is.
Since
it is because Newcastle,
yeah.
and it's before people jump to conclusions, it's nothing to do with geopolitics or regions or anything like that. It's because Newcastle have been taken over and they are becoming successful again. And Everton, who probably see themselves as a bigger club than Newcastle, they're at the opposite end of the table. So followers of teams are always going to envy that. In the National League, there'll be how many followers of the other teams in the National League are glad that Wrexham are doing what they're doing since their takeover in 2020? There won't be any of them. They'll all resent it. They'll all be hoping that Wrexham don't get promoted this season, because that's the way football works. If a team is suddenly successful and flush with money, you are not going to hope that they do well.
Obviously, if we look at what else was said in that press conference, Samuel, Ten Hag gave a little update on Rashford and basically said, look, it's too early at the moment to know whether he will be fit and available for the game after sustaining an ankle injury. If he is out of the game, it's going to be a huge blow, isn't it? Just like Newcastle missing Nick Pope has been fantastic for them. Rashford's been a goal-scoring machine, 24 goals this season, his best ever career. If he is out, Samuel, who do you start on that front three? Is it Weghorst up top, Anthony on the right, and Sancho on the left?
I think so. I think Weghorst may start even if Rashford is fit.
Regardless,
going back to the earlier point that if you're playing the percentages, if you want game changers and the importance of game changers as they have been for United in recent weeks, it is better to have 2 than 1. That's a very obvious statement to make, but Newcastle are going to be very stubborn. They're an obdurate team. As I said, their defensive record is the best in the Premier League this season, and they've got a clear and obvious back 4, back 5 when it is Pope. So you are going to need quite a few strings to your bow, and just turning to Garnacho, I don't think Ten Hag will want to leave himself short there. So it's almost as if you start off handicapping yourself by playing Weghorst, who's just got an absolutely dreadful record for United. 1 goal in 11. That's a disaster for a striker at any level, any club. Never mind someone at Man United. And you cut him some slack because he didn't expect to start 11 games on the spin. You can't account for Anthony Marshall, as I've said before, being made of papier-mâché. Someone said the other day when we were at training, as we were filming him, they said if we film him long enough, he'll probably have another injury. So it looks like he came through unscathed doing his very gentle ball work during that individual session. But you can't count on Marshall, and Marshall has let United down in that sense, and that's ensured that Weghorst has been overplayed, overexposed, and he has struggled for chances as well. He's not had many great chances during those 11 games, but he did have 2 great chances last week. And I mean, you saw the strikes against Leicester and Barcelona. They were very, very tame. They weren't even good saves by the goalkeeper. He hit the goalkeeper. So although United might start being impeded up front, at least with Weghorst, Anthony, Fernandes and Rashford, they have started some games together. There is a form of understanding, and if needed, you have got. I mean, Sancho has had his best games off the bench. Garnacho has had his best games off the bench, certainly in the domestic matches this season. So, going back to the point of 9 substitutes, you would have those two as two of the 3 attackers possibly on the bench, and you can't leave yourself short. You only get one chance to win a final in such an occasion. So, although if the team drops and Rashford is fit and Weghorst is starting, you'll have some United fans complaining about it. I think Ten Hag has done enough in recent weeks and months to be trusted with the selections that he makes, because he has not got a lot wrong.
As regular listeners will know, I am actually from Newcastle. You can probably tell by my accent. And as Rashford went off last night, I did get a text off my brother, who was almost a bit excited to see Rashford go off with a little limp, of course. He wouldn't want him to be injured seriously. But it will be a huge blow, won't it, Samuel? And I think there'll be thousands of Geordies looking at the team news come 3:30 on Sunday afternoon. If we talk about the wider point then, a trophy, Samuel, the League Cup, look, let's face it, it's not the best trophy to win. It's the FA Cup's little brother almost, and it's never been held in high regard to United fans. However, it does represent an opportunity to end that trophy drought. As I said earlier in the podcasting, last trophy was 2017 in the Europa League, and it's the longest trophy drought for 40 years. So if this season was supposed to be a transitional season for Ten Hag, really. It was supposed to be, for him to, change things and tweak things and try to get it right. But he's exceeded expectations. Securing Champions League and winning a trophy, what would that mean?
That would mean a success. The way the season has progressed, given that United compete on 4 fronts, it would be a minor disaster if they ended the season trophyless now. The way things are going in the top 4, they could have that practically boxed off before the clocks go forward, such as their league form, and the results have gone their way in recent weeks as well, with the main competitors dropping a lot of points really. And not only that, some of those teams look out of sorts. Tottenham don't look right, and they're 4th at the moment. Newcastle have had a very, very creditable season so far and have done very well to stay in the top 4 for as long as they have. But I think certainly I always sense that there might come a point where they do just start to fall away a little bit. Definitely, and Liverpool are coming to the fore as well. As far as their league form goes anyway, it's looking better. I don't think it could have got much worse than the Wolves' performance when they lost 3-0 there. So as far as the final goes, it's good to have a sense of occasion about it. Newcastle have got a fanatical following. They've been success-starved. This is a huge occasion for them. It's arguably more meaningful for them, but also because it's United and a trophy drought and a new manager, or newish manager, I suppose, who was only appointed back in April or May time, and the belief around the club and how different the club feels to previous seasons. It's you'd hope that it would be a really good game that marries with those ingredients, because traditionally as a fixture, certainly in the Keegan years and the Sir Bobby Robson years, certainly the Sir Bobby Robson, Sir Alex Ferguson years, there were a hell of a lot of goal fests during that time. But it is different now, and you can't always just hark back to the past, even though I'm sure there'll be reminders of the past left, right and centre at Wembley on Sunday on both sides. But it's a significant moment for United. I think to some of the people at the club, of the 2 games this week, if they had to choose, they would say that Sunday is the bigger game. I think if they'd gone out to Barcelona, there were people at the club who could see the positives from that as far as free midweeks go, and the fixture list not being as congested in March and April and May, and that possibly aiding their domestic form. But this is the earliest opportunity, as you say, they've got to end a trophy drought. They've taken advantage and getting to the final, and they've got that final step to take. And so far, they've got through February very, very impressively as far as their results go. They're unbeaten in February. And this is probably the biggest test of the lot, even though they've come up against a better team in Barcelona in midweek. It's a final against a very good team as well. It's the two teams are in the top 5 of the Premier League, so it's not exactly like, with all due respect to them, Swansea and Bradford in 2013. It's very, very different from that. So it's certainly going to be one that's going to have a lot of eyes on it on Sunday.
Oh, when Sunderland reached the final, Samuel, of course you've got to throw that in there against Manchester City.
Oh, City in 2014. Yeah. They went one. Yeah, I covered that game. I was at Wembley for that when Fabio Borini scored, and then that was Sunderland's day. Yes, Sunderland's day peaked at half time, really.
I mean, you talked about Liverpool and Tottenham, obviously, around Newcastle there, and I will give United fans some good news. In my personal opinion, I don't think Newcastle have been at the best since the World Cup. I think we've talked about they've obviously got the attacking talent, but I think it's gone a bit stale, actually. I feel like Newcastle season might have peaked, and United have obviously got that momentum now, so that's good news if you're travelling down there on Sunday afternoon down to London. And Samuel, obviously you will be, so safe travels to London. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Stephen, and I hope you enjoy your day in London as well, and safe travels to you.
Well, I've got my haircut, as you can see, and I'm off to get my suit measured, as a wise man once said. So thank you very much to the listeners. Have a great weekend. Take care.